Good morning from the National Weather Service office in Lake Charles. I'm meteorologist Donald Jones. It's been a few weeks since we've been able to catch up here together, so I figured we'd get together, shoot the breeze, see what's going on, talk about the next severe weather threat that's coming to our area, as we do around here. Unfortunately, yes, we are looking at another severe weather risk across the area, and once again, as has been the case for the last few weeks, it's going to happen on the weekend. I know there's a lot of festivals and events going on across the region this weekend, so this is going to have the potential to disrupt those plans. So it is important, if you're either hosting those events or planning to attend any one of those events out there this weekend, to be very weather aware and have a good idea as far as what's going on. As I said, we are going to have a cold front roll through the area. There is a severe weather risk with that. The biggest threat right now, it looks like, is going to be damaging winds. Now, damaging even more so than what we've been seeing the last couple of days. If you've stepped outside any time in the last 3 or 4 days, you've noticed it's been really windy out there, and today is no exception. We're looking at wind gusts so far this morning in the mid to upper 30s across the region, and that's going to continue all the way until this front actually gets through. We're going to be looking at winds of 30-plus miles an hour into tomorrow as well, ahead of that frontal boundary. Now, once it gets through, those winds will finally come down and give us a little break from the very strong blowy that's been going on out there. Cookie Death says it's very humid out there. Yes, and that is actually going to be playing a significant role in our severe weather threat. Obviously, we've been having this very warm tropical air mass blowing in for the last several days, and now we're going to have a pretty substantial cold front roll through tomorrow. And as those two air masses interact, that's where we're going to get our severe weather threat. So let's go ahead and jump into it here. As always, this is a live interactive briefing. So if you have any questions as we go through our briefing, feel free to post them in our comment section, as some of y'all have already found here this morning. And I'll be happy to answer them here just as soon as we wrap up our briefing. Let me go ahead and make this full screen as we jump into it. I was having some issues with getting my slides to show up full screen. I think I've got it mostly fixed. So hopefully that'll work out, but if we have any problems with that, we'll deal with that together. Anyway, as I mentioned, we are looking at some very strong winds out there this afternoon. Essentially what we've been having here is a series of low pressure areas that have been forming over parts of North Texas, western Oklahoma, the southern plains, basically. And then we've got an area of high pressure centered over Florida. The difference between those two has created a large, what we call, pressure gradient. It's essentially a difference in pressure between high and low pressure. And of course, those winds want to move from areas of high pressure to areas of low pressure, and that's what makes the wind blow. That's the very short and simple duration of what makes the wind blow anywhere. And the stronger that difference is between the high and low pressure areas, the stronger the winds are going to be. And we've been seeing that the last few days. We've had actually a series of 2 or 3 different areas of low pressure over the southern plains, and just being in proximity to that has led to some very strong winds. As I said, that's going to continue for the rest of the day today. Going to stay breezy tonight, not quite as strong as we've seen today, but it is going to remain breezy. And then going into tomorrow after sunrise, we're going to see those winds pick up again, and that's outside of the thunderstorms, not even including the thunderstorms that we're expecting across the area. We're still going to be looking at wind gusts 35, 40 miles an hour. Now, within those thunderstorms, we could be looking at winds even stronger. We could be looking at winds 60, 70 miles an hour. That's not out of the realm of possibility. As I mentioned, this is all going to be associated with a cold front that's going to come through the region, and it's going to get significantly cooler behind the front. We're going to get spring back in here. It's been very hot and humid the last few days, but we are going to pull spring back in behind that cold front, but beforehand, we've got to get through it. You can see we do have an enhanced risk. That's a category 3 out of 5. On the Storm Prediction Center severe weather scale, and you can see it extends across a large part of the state of Louisiana, up into the southern half of Arkansas, western Tennessee, which we got nailed by some significantly severe weather the last couple of days. They actually were in a high risk the other day, which is the highest category possible. Not going to be quite that high of a risk across our area, but still looking at the potential for some significant severe weather going through the day tomorrow. This is going to be probably a most of the day event too. It's not going to be something that's going to be in and out of here very quickly. We're going to be looking at a fairly long duration. We're going to have some individual cells kind of out in front of the cold front, and then we're expecting a squall line to develop right along the leading edge of it. Now, once that squall line gets through, the severe weather threat will be over with after that. But we are going to be looking at several hours of potential severe weather. Again, damaging winds, large hail, and tornadoes are all going to be a threat. Right now, I think the largest individual threat is going to be damaging straight line winds. There is a tornado threat, but it's not extremely high. Now, I say that's extremely high if one forms near you, but the higher of the risks is going to be the damaging wind threat. We'll talk about that here in detail in just a second. And then in addition to the severe weather threat, we're also looking at a low-end possibility of flash flooding. All of this humidity, all this moisture in the air is going to have the potential to produce some very heavy rainfall. Now, the rainfall totals are not expected to be really high, but what's going to happen is this rain is going to be falling very quickly, so we're going to get very high rainfall rates. We saw that last week with some of the storms that flooded parts of Rayne, Lafayette, parts of Eunice, parts of southern St. Landry Parish. Those areas, they didn't see huge rainfall accumulations. We only saw about 3 inches over there. Actually, rain got 10 inches, but that was a different issue entirely. But what happens is these very heavy rain showers fall and they drop a lot of water very quickly. It doesn't have time to run off. We get some short duration flash flooding, and that is going to be a risk with this event. Taking a look at the wind gusts so far this morning, you can see we've got gusts of upwards of 30 to almost 40 miles an hour across the parts of the area. This is not a forecast. This is actually what we've observed so far this morning. So we're looking at some very breezy conditions out there. It's a little bit lower across parts of interior southeast Texas, 20-ish miles an hour, but closer to the coast, we're closer to 40 miles an hour. And that's going to continue through the afternoon, through about sunset. Excuse me. I do think they come down a little bit after sunset tonight, but we're still going to be looking at some gusts 15 to 20 miles an hour overnight. And then they're going to pick up once again as we go through the day tomorrow. A wind advisory remains in effect across the region until 7 p.m. this evening. A wind advisory is issued anytime we're expecting winds of 20 miles an hour or greater, and we're well above that at this point. So that'll continue, and we'll probably have another wind advisory in effect tomorrow ahead of that cold front. And again, that's going to be outside of the thunderstorms. We could see stronger winds within them, but even outside of them, it's going to be gusting 30, maybe 40 miles an hour. Go. So this is a look at a little bit closer look at our area as far as the severe weather outlook. You can see the areas highlighted in orange there. I need to move my little thing up from a slight to an enhanced risk, but you get the idea. That is an enhanced risk, a category 3 out of 5 on the Storm Prediction Center severe weather scale. You can see that covers pretty much everywhere away from the counties and parishes along the immediate coastline. Right along the immediate coastline, the risk is a little bit lower, as is often the case. We get that what's called the marine layer. Essentially, the air mass coming right along the coast tends to inhibit tornado development a little more and severe weather development in general. So most of the time, the higher severe weather risk is going to be further to the north across parts of central Louisiana and areas away from the immediate coastline, and that is the case here. But areas over towards from Lake Charles to Lafayette, you are in this category 3, this enhanced risk for severe weather. We'll talk about these specific probabilities in just a second. And then right along the immediate coastline, you're in the yellow area. That's a slight risk, a category 2 out of 5. Let's talk specifically about the probabilities of seeing individual risks. You can see this is the probability of tornadoes right now. You can see the majority of the region is in the brown. That is basically a 5 to 10% chance of seeing a tornado within 25 miles of any location in that brown area. So let's take Lake Charles, for example. There's a 5 to 10% chance of seeing a tornado within 25 miles of Lake Charles. Now, if a tornado were to touch down, say in Vinton, for example, that's within 25 miles of Lake Charles. So that would technically count. So even though it doesn't necessarily hit your house, that was considered nearby. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about this probabilities of risk. So a 5 to 10% chance of seeing a tornado within 25 miles of any given location in the brown areas. The areas highlighted in green right along the immediate coastline. So that would be kind of Iberia, St. Martin, lower St. Martin and St. Mary parishes. That is a 2 to 4% chance of seeing a tornado. So you can see I've got the counties outlined, the counties and parishes, I should say, outlined there on the right-hand side in case you can't find your specific one on the map. You can see whether you're in that 5 to 10% or that 2 to 4% risk area. But the majority of the region is in that 5 to 10% chance of seeing a tornado. Now, looking at the wind risk, this is the probability of seeing damaging straight line winds. And you can see this is a much higher probability. The area is highlighted in red, which essentially covers basically along and north of the I-10 corridor, looking at a 30 to 45% chance of seeing damaging winds. That's 60 mile per hour or greater winds within 25 miles of any given location in those areas. So same idea. If we're talking about, say, Lake Charles, for example, or Lafayette, that means there's going to be there's a 30 to 45% chance of seeing 60 mile an hour or greater winds within 25 miles of those locations. And we choose 60 miles an hour because that's the point where we start seeing significant impacts, some significant damage from those winds. Even the winds we've seen the last couple of days, that's caused a few trees and especially some tree branches down across the area. But that's when we start talking about trees knocked over onto power lines, roofs starting to get blown off, damage to travel trailers and such like that. So 60 miles per hour is kind of our threshold for severe limits. The area is highlighted in yellow, which is essentially along and south of the I-10 corridor to the coast. A little bit lower risk, looking at about a 15 to 30% chance. You can see I've highlighted, or on the right-hand side, I've written out the individual parishes and counties and what your probabilities are. So you can see Tyler, Hardin, Jasper, Newton, Orange are in that 30 to 45% chance. Calcasieu, Beauregard, Vernon, Vermilion, Acadia, Rapides, Allen, Jeff Davis, Evangeline, Avoyelles, St. Landry, Lafayette, Iberia, and Upper St. Martin are all in that 30 to 45% chance. And then Cameron, Vermilion, Lower St. Martin, Iberia, and St. Mary are in that lower overall risk, that 15 to 29% chance, or we'll call it 15 to 30% chance of seeing damaging winds. Now, in addition to that, you can see those little kind of dashed lines all over the graphic there on the left-hand side. That's an indication of even stronger wind probabilities. That's 74 mile per hour or greater winds. That's hurricane force winds and the probabilities for that. So that means there's a greater than 10% chance of seeing higher than hurricane force winds with some of these individual storms here as we go through the day tomorrow. And you can see those dashed lines pretty much cover the entire area. So there's a greater than 10% chance of seeing hurricane force winds with some of these storms going through tomorrow. So kind of keep that in mind. Now let's take a look at the probability of seeing large hail. This is the same idea. You can see the highest overall risk is, and I actually didn't put the individual counties and parishes for the highest risk, but the highest risk is the areas highlighted in red there. That's a 30 to 45% chance of seeing large hail. Now we define large hail as being quarter size or larger, and that's going to cover Jasper and Newton counties, kind of the northern half of Jasper and Newton counties, as well as the northern half of Beauregard Parish and pretty much all of Vernon Parish and the northern half of Rapides Parish. You can see Alexandria is just kind of right on the edge there between that red and the yellow. The yellow is a 15 to 30% chance of seeing large hail, so quarter size or larger hail. And that's what we're seeing across pretty much the rest of the area. All of those, the parishes outlined there on the right in the 15 to 29% chance. And then again, we've got those dashed lines there indicating the potential for what we call giant hail. So that's 2-inch or greater hail. So I believe that's, I want to say that's golf ball size. I'd have to go look it up real quick to see what the common comparison is. But essentially, there is a greater than 10% chance of seeing giant hail across the area. So we're going to be talking up to the size of baseballs, and that is certainly large enough to do some significant damage. Now, of course, not everybody's going to see that. That may only happen over a very short, very small area, but it could have some significant impacts and do some significant damage across those small areas that do see it. That's why we're talking about it here. So taking a look, all three of these graphics here, the lowest overall risk of the three is the tornado risk. The higher risk is going to be the damaging winds and the large hail. That's not to say that we aren't going to have any tornadoes, because there is still a risk of tornadoes. But the damaging straight line winds and the large hail are going to be have the higher probabilities of seeing those compared to tornadoes. Now, again, I told you at the top here, we do have a risk of flash flooding as well. And this is going to be mainly due to the heavy rainfall rates or the high rainfall rates, where we could be seeing 3 to 4 inches of rainfall in a 1 hour period. When rain falls that quickly, it doesn't have time to run off the area roadways, into the ditches, into the waterways, the rivers, the creeks, and thereabouts. So that's when we get, street flooding rapidly occurring. We're not expecting a whole lot in terms of rainfall totals with this event. We're only going to be looking at about between about a half inch to maybe 1.5 inches in general. Now, some areas are going to see more than this, but generally speaking, we're looking at a half inch up to 1.5 inches, which normally, if that were to fall over a period of, say, 3-4 hours, that would not be enough to cause flash flooding. But when we're talking about these high rainfall rates where we get 3-4 inches an hour, that's fast enough to cause some street flooding. The good news when it comes to that kind of flooding, it tends to be short-lived. So you may only be looking at street flooding for an hour or two, that it runs off very quickly, and you're in good shape after that. But that is something to be on the lookout for going through the day tomorrow, is the potential for this very heavy rainfall leading to some street flooding. So, if you're encountering heavy rainfall, obviously you want to slow down, but be aware that water is going to be ponding on roadways pretty quickly. This is kind of more associated with the gradient winds we were talking about, but the fact that we've had these very strong southerly winds is going to continue to lead to coastal flooding across the area. We've seen that the last couple of days, where essentially it's basically a tiny baby storm surge is what we're looking at, because we've got a strong 30, 40 mile an hour wind gust blowing that water inland. So we're looking at tides running between about 1 foot to 1.5 foot above normal along the coastline during periods of high tide, which right now is essentially from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Most of our coastal sites actually have 2 high tide periods. That's why it's such a long period. It does something where it kind of goes up and then it comes down a little bit, then it goes up again, and then it comes down to a low tide. So that's what we're going to be dealing with and continue to be dealing with today and tomorrow. And of course, when we're talking about that, those who experience it regularly are very familiar with the areas that are closed as a result of that. So lots, roadways right along the immediate Gulf Coast are going to be subject to being closed due to coastal flooding during those high tide periods. Let's talk about timing now, when we're expecting this to actually occur. Now we're looking, the graphic you're looking at here starts tomorrow morning. You can see it starts at 4 a.m. tomorrow morning, and this goes through about noontime Sunday. If I can get me out of the way there, you can see it goes through about noontime Sunday. You can see the hours there on the top. These are our Louisiana cities, and you can kind of pick out whatever one is closest to you. I know this doesn't cover all of them, but this does give you an idea with regards to timing. We're going to be seeing some showers and thunderstorms beginning as early as about 6 a.m. You can see DeRidder looking out already about a 60% chance of rain by 6 a.m. Same thing for Leesville. You're not too far away from that. And then as we get to by about noontime, the overall risk for Louisiana cities increases significantly. We're looking at anywhere between about a 60 to 95% chance of rain between about noon and midnight. Still pretty high, actually, going into early Sunday morning. So this is not going to be, unfortunately, it's not going to be a fast event. This is going to be an event that's going to go on, through the day. Not everybody's going to see rain at the exact same time. Obviously, basically this is going to start with individual cells developing out in front of the squall line, and then there's going to be a squall line that's going to move through right along the leading edge of the cold front. So just because you see these high rain or these high precipitation probabilities doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to rain constantly from noon till 5 a.m. Sunday. That's not going to be the case. But that is when we're going to be looking at those individual cells developing, and you're going to have a chance of seeing those storms roll through those areas. Taking a look now, let me jump forward here. I clicked off my screen. There we go. These are the same probabilities for our southeast Texas counties. You can see a little bit earlier, being a little bit further to the east, but we're still looking at about 5, 6 a.m. for the highest rain chances, continuing through about midnight Saturday night into early Sunday morning. Then the chances go significantly down because that cold front will actually then move through. There is still a chance that we could see some light shower activity behind the frontal system, but the severe weather threat will be over at that point. Once that squall line moves through, even if there is still some residual light rain, there's no chance of that becoming severe. All of the severe weather is going to be along and ahead of the frontal boundary itself. Then once that front gets through, we're actually going to be looking at some very, very nice conditions pretty much all the way through next week. So like I said at the top, spring's coming back. We're going to be looking at high temperatures only in the mid to upper 60s for Sunday into Monday, 70s for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, really into Friday. We're still only in the upper 70s to right around 80 degrees. So it's going to be very, very nice. Overnight lows back into the 40s and 50s, and it's going to feel much drier out there too. So you'll definitely notice the difference. This is going to be a significant front that's going to be moving through the area here, and we'll get some very nice weather behind it. Probably some of the nicest weather we've had all year so far. It'll be real springtime for at least 5 or so days. And then the summer will probably come back as we get towards late next week into next weekend. And we'll have to see whether the trend continues of it raining every weekend. We'll see how that works out here by the time we get down into next weekend. So that's what we have here this morning from the National Weather Service. Let me go ahead and see if I can jump back to full screen here, if I can press the right button. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have here over the next few minutes. I see a few of them have already been thrown in there. But if you do have a question, if you're still watching with me, feel free to throw it in there. I'll be happy to answer it for you. Let me go ahead and scroll back up a little bit. Jonathan asked, what kind of tornado threat does sulfur have? Again, the risk of tornadoes is going to be a little bit lower than some of the other severe weather threats. So we're going to be looking at for the sulfur area, roughly a 5 to 10% chance. And that's the majority of the area. That's what we're going to be seeing across most of the area. Pretty much all the areas highlighted in brown there. You can see the parishes and counties outlined on the right-hand side in a 5 to 10% chance of seeing a tornado. Cookie Death asks, is there any chance SPC might issue a moderate risk for Saturday? There is a chance. I think if there's going to be a moderate risk, it's probably going to be a little bit further to our north. So if I can, let me show the graphic here that shows the kind of the zoomed out view. You can see the areas highlighted in orange there. That's the enhanced risk. That's category 3 out of 5. If they issue a moderate risk, I think it's going to be more kind of North Louisiana, Southern Arkansas, those areas. It's possible the moderate risk could potentially clip parts of maybe Rapides or Vernon Parish. But I think if there is a moderate risk issued, it's going to be probably mostly further to the north. Robert says, I don't like any chance for tornadoes, especially where I live. It's like a magnet. Yeah, I don't blame you, Robert. I don't think anybody likes the chance for tornadoes. Audrey asks, what am I expecting for the Carlos Sulphur area? Again, we're going to be looking at this line of thunderstorms. A squall line is going to be rolling through with some individual storms out in front of it. All forms of severe weather are going to be possible, so tornadoes, damaging winds, and large hail. But the highest risk is going to be damaging straight line winds right now. Then our second highest risk is going to be large hail. And then our third highest risk will be tornadoes. So all forms of severe weather are going to be possible, but I think the damaging wind risk is going to be the highest. You can see the probabilities there. All the areas highlighted in red, which is pretty much along and north of the I-10 corridor, looking between a 30 to 45% chance of seeing damaging winds. That's our highest probability for an individual severe weather type. Sherry says, weather level Wizard of Oz tomorrow. Let's hope not. But yeah, for a few of us, it might be. Terry says, we'll be flying from North Carolina on Sunday and landing in Lafayette around 11. Any delays possible? I think just about all, if not all, of the rainfall and severe weather threat should be over with in the Lafayette area by 11 Sunday. So no, I don't anticipate there being any delays by 11 a.m. Sunday. Madison asked, do you think Jennings will see a tornado? Jennings is in that 5 to 10% risk, so I can say there's a 5 to 10% chance that there will be a tornado in the Jennings vicinity. Now, when I say 5 to 10% chance, again, what I mean is there's a 5 to 10% chance that there will be a tornado within 25 miles of Jennings. That's what I'm saying with that. Now, again, that's we give this in probabilities because I can't sit here and tell you where the tornado is going to form tomorrow. The meteorology is not that good. So we've got to give it to you in probabilities. And you might think, well, 5 to 10%, that's not very high. And you're right in general. But when you think about what the likelihood or the probability of a tornado happening on any other day, I mean, what is the probability of a tornado happening today? It's virtually zero. So when you think about it from that perspective, a 5 to 10% chance is very high. And you also, when you think about the impacts of a tornado, you know, that's a pretty high overall risk. It kind of reminds me, and a lot of y'all may have heard about the asteroid that had a chance of hitting Earth. It's now virtually zero at this point. But there was a time a couple of months ago where the probability of an asteroid hitting the Earth was roughly about 3%, which normally you think 3%, that's not very high. But when you're talking about an asteroid potentially wiping out, the planet, all of a sudden 3% seems relatively high. So think about it kind of in that perspective. From a 5 to 10% chance of seeing a tornado, that's actually a pretty high overall threat. Alexa says, I'd like to cancel my subscription for weather, please. Nope, can't cancel. That's kind of like a gym membership. You just have to keep going on and on forever. Crispy Lynn says, will these potential strong winds still be coming out of the south-southeast? The gradient winds, yes, they will be. Until the cold front gets through, they will remain out of the south-southeast. But keep in mind, there's a difference between the gradient winds and the winds from the actual thunderstorms. This, what we're looking at right here, These are our wind gusts that we've observed so far this morning. And that's the gradient winds. That's the winds that are blowing now kind of between those areas of high pressure and the areas of low pressure. Now, within individual thunderstorms, those winds can change direction, depending on which direction the storm is coming from, which way the winds around it are blowing. So the damaging winds that are produced in a thunderstorm can potentially be coming from a different direction than the general flow of the wind. But yeah, as far as the gradient winds, we'll continue to see those out of the southeast today, tonight, and tomorrow morning until that cold front comes through, and then we'll see them switch out of the northwest. But they will be a lot lighter once they make that switch to out of the northwest. Amelia says, will the severe weather last that long, or is it mostly the rain that will last until midnight? Worried about the damaging winds because we are surrounded by trees. The severe weather threat is going to continue, like I said, until that cold front actually moves through, which, depending on where you are, could be earlier or later in the evening. For areas further to the west, say southeast Texas, over towards Beaumont, parts of Hardin, Tyler counties, you're going to be done with this faster than areas further to the east. So I think the cold front will be through southeast Texas before midnight, probably well before midnight tomorrow night. As far as southwest Louisiana, say the Lake Charles area up towards DeRidder, it's going to be a little bit later in the evening. For south central Louisiana, Lafayette, New Iberia, those areas, that's when you're going to be dealing with it kind of late into the night and possibly into early Sunday morning. So, it could be, if you're in the Lafayette, New Iberia, Morgan City area, we could be looking at it being more of an overnight event for the actual frontal boundary. Sarah asks, is this a sign of what hurricane season will be like? No, it's not. What we've been dealing with the last couple of days and this severe weather event has nothing to do with hurricane season. That said, Colorado State actually just put out their forecast for the upcoming hurricane season, and they are calling for another above average season in terms of storm totals, named storm totals. NOAA and the Weather Service, we don't put out our official forecast until the last week of May, so we still got another month, almost 2 months until that forecast comes out. But Colorado State has a long history of doing of hurricane seasonal forecasts, and they're pretty good at it too. And those numbers came out, and they are calling for an above-average hurricane season. Kathy says, travel from Meridian to Orange tomorrow afternoon. You're going to be traveling through that severe weather, unfortunately. I mean, straight up, that's what you're going to be dealing with. You're going to come through those individual cells, potentially if you run into one, and likely that squall line as it's rolling through as well. David says, when can we expect the straight line winds to impact Beauregard Parish? If you're talking about the thunderstorm winds, you're going to be looking at probably late afternoon into early evening. There's still a lot of uncertainty with regards to individual models bringing that squall line in at different times. That's why I'm not getting too particular with the exact time that it's going to be rolling through, but you're going to be looking at most likely late afternoon into early evening for that squall line to move through Beauregard Parish. Pamela asked, will Lake Charles see hail? She just jumped on. Let me move over to my hail graphic here. And there is a possibility. I can't say that for certain, but this is the probability of large hail. You can see the Lake Charles area is in the yellow. That's a 15 to 30% chance of seeing quarter size or larger hail within 25 miles of the Lake Charles area. And you can see, again, those areas that are kind of dashed, which extends from Lake Charles up towards Alexandria, Leesville, back towards Woodville. That means there's a greater than 10% chance of seeing giant hail. So that's 2 inches in diameter or larger. So, something like that. We're talking like probably close to a baseball size. Angela's asking, what is the timing on the weather coming through Lake Charles? It's going to be similar to what we just talked about with Beauregard Parish. We're going to be looking at that squall line rolling through kind of late afternoon into the early evening. Looking at the probabilities, you can see find Lake Charles on there. We're going to be looking at the probability of seeing some individual storms, though, beginning as early as 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. The highest probabilities are going to be between about noon and midnight. So I know that's a long time period. That's a 12-hour time frame. But again, like we said, there's a little bit of a difference between modeling as far as exactly when this squall line is going to come through, and the storms are going to be spread out ahead of it. So you could run into one or more of those storms ahead of the squall line earlier in the day. So I don't want to say that you're only going to have to be worried about it from, X time to Y time. Essentially, pretty much any time tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening. And I think that squall line will be coming through the Lake Charles area probably sometime during the early evening, maybe between about 4 and 8 p.m. or thereabouts. Robert says, in other words, stay weather aware tomorrow? Absolutely, yes. Use your heads and stay safe. Yeah, so have a method of getting severe weather warnings. Most of us, that's our cell phones these days. They can give us tornado and severe thunderstorm warnings. Weather apps are great, depending on what area you're in. You can get your local news TV station's weather app. They're usually very good about alerting you for severe thunderstorm, tornado, flash flood, and those things. The warnings that are built into your phone will actually only go off if it's a tornado warning, if it's a what's called a considerable severe thunderstorm warning. So that's a severe thunderstorm warning producing hurricane force winds or more, or a what's called a considerable flash flood warning, when we're expecting more than just minor street flooding, when we're talking about water starting to get into homes. If you want warnings for things that go beyond that, you're going to need an app of some kind, whether it's a national app, the Weather Channel, AccuWeather, I can't believe I just said that out loud, or preferably your local TV media apps will alert you for some of those other ones. Candy asks, what is the possibility of training storms? It is a possibility, but the thing about that is it's very difficult to say. It's almost impossible to say really exactly where that would have the potential to occur. We saw it the other day in the rain incident. And by rain, I mean R-A-Y-N-E. I got it right. I got it there. The city rain, which saw over 10 inches of rain. That was a training event that occurred pretty much without any advance notice at all. That's something that we certainly didn't forecast, but it wound up happening. There is a chance that could happen. I don't think it's going to be very widespread. So what this more likely to happen with this system tomorrow is we get one strong thunderstorm that moves across, then we get a little bit of a break, then a second one may move through, and then that squall line moves through. So you may get intermittent periods of heavy rain as opposed to just consistent heavy rain for hours and hours. Again, the rainfall totals that we're forecasting for this event are not particularly high. Let me see if I can find it here. There it is. Generally looking between about a half to maybe 1.5 inches of rainfall altogether. Now, some areas are going to see more than that if you see more than one thunderstorm roll through. But in general, the biggest issue with regards to flooding for this event is going to be more the rainfall rates, the very heavy rainfall happening over a short period of time, rather than rain falling over a period of many hours just constantly. Kathy asks, is the Torcon scale used to simplify the percent probability, or is that just another which thing? That is a Weather Channel thing. That is a thing they made up. I don't know what their basis is for deciding which area gets what's number. They do tend to align fairly closely with the Storm Prediction Center, but I don't know off the top of my head what they use to determine what numbers they use. That's not a product that we use. That's a Weather Channel only thing. Natasha asked, what about sulfur? Sulfur is going to see exactly what we've been talking about. There is going to be a probability of severe weather. So for the Lake Charles sulfur area, we're looking at a 15 to 30% chance of seeing large hail. We're looking at a 30 to 45% chance of seeing damaging winds. That's 60 mile per hour or greater winds. And we're looking at a 5 to 10% chance of seeing a tornado. So all three of those are going to be possible, as well as the heavy rainfall. Leslie is so done with this. I don't blame you, Leslie. I'm done with it too, but it's going to happen whether we want to be done with it or not. Mandy asks, are the winds going to be about the same now when this hits? Ahead of the squall line, yes, we're still going to be looking at these strong southerly winds. Now, within those thunderstorms, the winds can be even stronger. We've been looking at gusts so far this morning about 30, 35, maybe 40 miles an hour. Within the thunderstorms, we could be looking at wind gusts of 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. So they could be even stronger inside the thunderstorms. Now, not everybody's going to see that, but some areas could. But these 30, 40 mile an hour wind gusts are going to continue even outside of the thunderstorms for the rest of the day today and through most of the day tomorrow. Because these winds are not associated with thunderstorms. These are associated with just large areas of high and low pressure. And that's not going anywhere until tomorrow night. Leslie says, hopefully it knocks the pollen down. That would be nice. Rain does have a tendency to wash the pollen off of things, although knocking it down is usually only a brief reprieve. Leslie says, can you explain to everyone about a PDS? A PDS, I'm assuming you're talking about the particularly dangerous situation. That's a product that's issued by the Storm Prediction Center when we have a particularly dangerous situation. That's usually issued whenever we're expecting a significant tornado outbreak or a significant outbreak of damaging winds that are going to affect a large amount of people. It's very rare. You know, they only issue those a couple of times a year usually. And it's even more rare down in this part of the world. We've had them before, but it's very, very rare. And I don't think we're going to see that with this event. Christina says, so the weather starts in the night around 4 a.m. for the Vintenish area and then gets worse later Saturday afternoon. When can we expect the worst of the weather? Well, it's not going to be like a 1 hour period where you're going to experience the absolute worst and then it's going to be done with. You know, the risk is going to continue through most of the day because we're going to have these individual cells that are going to develop throughout the day. You know, so like you're right about the timing. We're going to be looking at it beginning potentially as early tomorrow morning. But as we go through the day and temperatures start to warm up more, that's going to increase the amount of energy available and therefore the overall risk. But I can't say that the most significant risk is going to be, you know, between 5 and 6 p.m. We're generally going to be looking at a pretty significant risk anytime from about noon to midnight, or at least until that frontal boundary actually makes it through. Now, once that squall line moves through, the winds turn out of the north, that's going to end the severe weather threat. But I can't give you an exact time frame at this point because we're going to be looking at those individual storms developing out in front of it that not everybody's going to see, but there are going to be the potential for severe weather going on through the afternoon and evening. Sheila says, how bad is Kirbyville supposed to get? I'm super weather worried and have high anxiety. Don't we all, Sheila? As far as how bad is it going to get, we're going to be looking at, you've got pretty much the same risk as everybody else in Southeast Texas. The highest risk is going to be the potential for damaging winds. So we're looking at about a 30 to 45% chance of seeing damaging winds within 25 miles of the Kirbyville area. Roughly about a 15 to 30% chance of seeing large hail and a 5 to 10% chance of seeing a tornado. Now, it's possible you don't see any of those. In fact, it's likely you don't see any of those, but there is the possibility that you could see one or more. Robert says, our local guy, hey, I'm a local guy. I don't know how much more local you want to get. I mean, we cover Southeast Texas and Southwest Louisiana. I'm a local guy. Maybe I'm not your local guy, but I could be your local guy. Anyway, East Texas will get bad weather tonight apart from tomorrow's weather. No, there's not a separate storm system coming in apart from tomorrow's weather. You may see some storms that develop early tomorrow morning, but that's all going to be associated with this cold front. So let me pull up. These are the probabilities of precipitation for Southeast Texas. You can see really getting going as early as 6 a.m., maybe a little, might even see 4 or 5 a.m., but it's not going to be before midnight. It's not going to be until after midnight that we see these storms. But these are all going to be associated with along and ahead of this cold front. There's not a separate storm system coming through. Jenny asked, what about the Ville Platte area? Ville Platte, you're looking at, again, the whole region is really very similar in what kind of severe weather we're expecting. We're looking at 30 to 45% chance of seeing damaging winds, so 60 mile an hour or greater winds across all of St. Landry. We're looking at roughly about a 15 to 30% chance of seeing quarter size or larger hail. And then we're looking at a 5 to 10% chance of seeing a tornado within 25 miles of the Ville Platte area. As far as rainfall totals, you're going to be looking at anywhere between about a ½ inch to 1.5 inches, although some areas could see higher than that. Keith says, I think winds are more than 40 miles an hour at times. I've seen gusts that had to be almost 50 or so. Crazy. Yesterday or day before yesterday, that's probably true. We did have some wind gusts over 50 miles an hour, especially, what was it, Wednesday afternoon, we had some to about 55. Today, so far, at least as of when I came on the air here, the highest we've gotten so far has been, well, 38 technically, or 39 down right along the coast. People, including myself, are actually pretty poor judges of the wind speed just by going out and looking at it without actually having a wind sensor, an anemometer with them. It a lot of times feels a lot stronger than it actually is. That's nothing against you. I'm not saying that you don't know what you're talking about, because I wouldn't be any better at it. But people tend to overestimate wind speeds in most cases, especially strong winds. Casey asks, what are the winds for sulfur for this? Well, the gradient winds, the winds like we've got blowing right now, again, about 40 miles an hour this afternoon for those wind gusts. As far as what kind of wind gusts we can experience within those thunderstorms tomorrow, 60, 70 miles an hour is kind of what will be possible. Stephen asks, has it been confirmed that you are the leader of the Black Shirt Mafia? Thank you for your service. I suppose so. I am the unofficial leader. Bow before my majesty. Behold the power of the black t-shirt. Leslie says, enjoy the cool snap. It's probably the last until fall. You're not wrong. If it's not the last, it's certainly going to be towards the end of it. We're getting late in the season for our cool weather, but you can see behind that frontal boundary, the next 6-7 days behind it are looking very nice. We're going to be looking at temperatures in the mid 60s to lower 70s for a few days. Then we'll be in the upper 70s kind of later this week with overnight lows in the 40s. Might not be out of the realm of possibility to touch a 39, maybe even up across central Louisiana. So it's going to be nice out there. Enjoy it, because you're right, it's going away soon. And then it's going to be hot. I don't want it. Robert says, you're our local guy, but KFDM is a little closer. Fair point. I'll give you that. No argument from me. Naraya says, is the updated outlook, or is that not out yet? Let me check to see if there's been an update since I got on the air. They usually do put out a day 2 and at noon. Let me take a look here real quick to see if my information is already outdated. No, this looks like the latest one. So the one you're seeing here is the latest one. For the moment, I'll throw that back up there just so we can see what we're talking about. So yeah, that is the latest outlook from the Storm Prediction Center. There is or will likely be another update this afternoon, but I don't expect it's going to change a whole lot. Leos, is anyone coming up with or close to having a way to break up these storms and hurricanes yet? Just curious with all this new technology. Not that I'm aware of. Weather modification that's a thing that people have experimented with for quite a while. I mean, really, probably most of human history. But as from a scientific perspective and in a serious capacity, it's only been really seriously considered since about the 70s. You've heard probably about the cloud seeding projects, which was an actual thing. They did some experimenting with it about dropping. Essentially, they would fly a plane into a storm and drop little silver iodide particles. The idea being, the thing is, when it comes to rain, let me make me full screen here. I'm going to tell you a story. So every rain droplet requires a little piece of something to coalesce around. You can't have, raindrops don't form naturally without something for that moisture to condense onto. Could be a little piece of dust, could be a little piece of salt, could be a little piece of anything. And what happens is, so actually rainwater is not as clean as you think it is, because every raindrop has a dust particle or some kind of little particle, bit of dirt that it formed on. Anyway, the idea was, if you fly a plane through a storm and drop a bunch of those little particles, they chose silver iodide because it tends to attract water, they can make it rain more efficiently and then rain out the moisture. It won't rain there, it'll rain here instead. The results of that were very inconclusive. There was no certainty that it had any material effect. There have been attempts at doing something similar in subsequent attempts, but it really never led to any conclusive results that it for sure was making a significant difference in terms of how much rainfall one area was getting versus another. So is it possible? Maybe. The science has not proved anything conclusively yet. As far as hurricanes go, there's always the question that I get about can we just drop a nuclear bomb into a hurricane? What you have to keep in mind about a hurricane is a hurricane produces enough energy in one day to light the entire United States for a year. Okay, so that's the kind of energy we're talking about. It's a massive amount of energy. And even a nuclear explosion would be not enough to materially disrupt that. Besides that obvious point, there's also the risk of, if you blow something up in a hurricane, now you've got radioactive material being spread all over, not just the hurricane, but also all of the water in the hurricane is then going to spread that radioactivity further out. So that's pretty unrealistic. Even if the energy was able to match it, the long-term impacts would be not worth the risk of doing so. We'd much rather have a hurricane than 1,000 years of radioactive decay. There's my little spiel on that. Moving on. Catherine says, would you recommend not staying in a trailer? I would recommend that if we have a tornado watch in effect, that you do find somewhere else to be. Trailers are not safe places to be during hurricanes. I mean, during tornadoes. You got me talking about hurricanes. Trailers are not safe places to be, even with those strong straight line winds. You get a 60, 70, 80 mile an hour wind gust smacking up against the side of a broadside of a trailer that's not anchored into the ground, then it's going to roll over. I've seen it countless times, tornadoes and straight line winds where people are in trailers, that trailer rolls and they get injured, if not killed, as a result of it. So trailers are not safe places to be during any kind of a wind event. So yeah, if we do have a tornado watch that's issued, I would recommend trying to find a more sturdy shelter, whether that be another house, a friend, a relative, or even a business. Go to Walmart, go to somewhere that actually has a shelter that's attached to the ground somehow. That's going to be a safer place to be. Sheila asks, what are we looking at as far as power outages in South Lake Charles? It's going to be possible, especially if we get some of those very strong thunderstorms roll through with those straight line winds, or God forbid a tornado. There would be some power outages. So I would expect at least a few power outages. I can't tell you exactly who or exactly how long, but yeah, I would expect a few power outages at least across the area tomorrow. Moscow regularly clears skies for May 9th parade, Russia's Independence Day, and Veterans Day combined. Okay. I'm not going to buy it, but okay. Stacy asks, is Buna, Texas in the 3? You are in Buna, Texas. I think you're... I want to say yes, if I remember exactly. I'm trying to remember exactly where Buna is in relation to this map here. But yeah, if you're not in it, you're right on the cusp of it. So yeah, I would consider yourself in the 3, the enhanced risk area. So yeah, you are looking at a higher overall risk of severe weather tomorrow. Bruce says Hiroshima and Nagasaki are okay now, as is Bikini Atoll. It makes you wonder on the predictions of radiation poisoning for hundreds of years is as correct as we think. The thing about radiation poisoning is, it's not something that happens immediately. It happens over a period of time. The radiation itself damages the cells in your body. So it's not, unless it's an extreme amount of radiation, you'll feel that immediately. But radiation poisoning is something that happens gradually over a period of time. So I think there have been documented cases of cancer risks rising significantly in those areas as a result of radiation. I'm getting us off topic here, but there's my little tangent on that. Sue says, when does this start for Lake Charles? We're going to be looking at rain beginning as early tomorrow morning. Let me pull up the numbers here. So we're looking at as early as about 6 a.m. tomorrow morning for parts of southwest Louisiana. The highest probabilities of precipitation are going to be generally between about noon and midnight tomorrow. So it's mainly going to be an afternoon and evening event, but we could see a few showers or thunderstorms tomorrow morning. All right. I've reached the bottom of my question list, so if you do have any more questions, feel free to throw it in there. I got a few more minutes here that I can hang out before I got to move on to, I'm actually off today, so I'm going to get out of here for the time being. But if you do have a question, you're first in line, so feel free to throw it in there here. Still got a pretty good audience here. We got almost 400 people watching at the moment. Let's see. Leslie asked, what does heat do with an approaching cold front? Does it make for a more severe storm? It can. You know, the warmer an area is, the more energy obviously is in the atmosphere, and the more potentially unstable the atmosphere is. So if you think about the base idea of the mechanics of warm air rising and cold air descending, you know, the warmer an environment is, the faster that air is going to potentially rise. So the warmer an air mass is, the more naturally unstable it is. That tends to result in stronger thunderstorms. That's why we get those during the summertime around here. When we get those temperatures climbing into the low to mid 90s, we get those afternoon thunderstorms. They're usually fairly quick, but they can be pretty strong. That's the same idea. So generally when we have a warm and very humid environment like we have right now, and then we have a strong cold front that's essentially going to be digging a wedge through that warm, moist air, that's when we get the threat for the stronger storms. Tracy says, I'll be getting off of work at 10 p.m. Saturday evening. When will it start for Scott, Louisiana? Again, it's going to start earlier in the day, so we're going to be looking at those individual thunderstorms beginning kind of early in the afternoon. Let me see if I can find Lafayette's going to be the closest one to Scott, so you can see the one's kind of halfway in the middle of my my columns here. You can see the highest overall probabilities for rain essentially is between about 6 p.m. and 4 or 5 a.m. Sunday morning. So yeah, being a little bit further to the east, this is going to be a little bit later of an event for you, but you can see we are looking at some rain beginning as early as noon. So it could be as early as noon, but I think the majority of the rain and the severe weather threat is going to be 6 p.m. through about, we'll call it 4 a.m. Sunday morning. Kristen's asking about the tornado outlook for Leesville. Let's take a look at that. So here is our probabilities of seeing tornadoes. You can see there's a 5 to 10% chance of seeing a tornado within 25 miles of most of the area. That's the areas highlighted in brown there, and that does include Leesville. So there's essentially a 5 to 10% chance of seeing a tornado within 25 miles of Leesville tomorrow. Tommy asks, is this a slow-moving front of storms, or will they clear out pretty fast in the Lake Charles area? It's going to be moving pretty progressively, and by progressively, I mean at a pretty decent clip. But it's going to be something that's going to be still fairly long duration, even so, because these storms are going to be beginning potentially fairly early in the day. So we could be looking at storms from as early as around sunrise or even a little before sunrise. The majority of the activity is going to be during the afternoon and evening. So, you know, like the squall line itself, it's probably going to be moving at, 35, 40 miles an hour or thereabouts. But ahead of it, those individual cells, we could potentially be dealing with most of the afternoon and evening. Lisa says, I might be late. How is Deweyville looking for tornadoes? Deweyville is going to be very similar to what most of the rest of the area is seeing, and that's roughly a 5 to 10% chance of seeing a tornado within 25 miles of Deweyville. All right, I've reached the bottom of my question list again, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up here for the time being. If you have a question that I missed for some reason, please post them or send it to us as a direct message on Facebook. You can also send us a message on X. You can also send us a message on Instagram. We're on all three, so lots of ways to get in touch with us. My email is also on the screen there in the bottom right-hand corner, donald.jones@noaa.gov. You can send me an email, and I'll be happy to answer your question that way. If I can, I'm going to be in and out for the rest of the day today because I'm technically off, so I got to run out and do some errands while I've got the time. But I will answer your question if I can. Also, you can give us a call here at our office, area code 337-477-5285. We've got forecasters here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so we can definitely get you an answer that way as well. We'll see about providing another one of these updates here tomorrow morning if I can manage to get in here and get one set up. Otherwise, we'll continue to provide updates through all of our social media and, of course, our website, weather.gov/Lake Charles. We'll have all the latest and greatest for you on that. Tomorrow is going to be a severe weather day, so definitely have a way, preferably more than one way, but at least one way to receive weather alerts, weather warnings, and watches. In the event that those are issued, I'd say it's pretty likely that we're going to get watches. We'll see how the warnings pan out. So have a way to get those. Even during the early morning hours, it's not out of the realm of possibility we could see a couple. So when you go to bed tonight, make sure you have your phone nearby or some way of getting awoken in the event that that a severe weather warning is issued for your area. In the meantime, everyone have a wonderful rest of your day. Go enjoy the breeze. Maybe fly a kite. I don't know. It's getting to the upper end of kite flying weather. It might tear a kite apart at this point, but still not a bad day as we go through the evening. Especially with the breeze. And then once we get this front through, next week's going to look really nice. Have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.